A knife dripping without a cut. Mystery or illusion? Welcome to Mystery Parlor. I am your host, Axon. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Your voices make this journey unforgettable. Now let's begin. If you want to watch a man earn his living by refusing to budge, come to West 35th Street at 11:30 on a Tuesday and look in on my employer. He was in the red leather throne where the day sets him like a jewel in a ring. The same way the century plants Fritz's orchids at 9 in the morning, and the same way the sun never consults anybody about where to go at noon. Wolfe had just concluded the daily battle with the dictionary. He calls it reading the paper, and had announced to the room that no Englishman, not even Johnson, has contrived a more barbarous construction than a headline writer, when the front bell rang like a conscience that had overslept. It would have been natural to let it ring. Wolfe enjoys ignoring bells on principle, and I enjoy picking which principle to annoy him with. But from the kitchen came the sound of Fritz's shoes stopping dead on tile, and then Fritz himself, moving at a clip he reserves for soufflés and civic emergencies. When Fritz runs, something is burning, or someone is. "Archie," he called, not waiting to be invited in. "Mr. Goodwin, please. There is a parcel at the door, addressed to Mr. Wolfe." Perishable Wolfe closed his eyes at the word perishable, as if Fritz had said bubonic. "Confound it, Archie." "I heard," I told him, and went. The parcel was the right size to be innocent, and the wrong size to be harmless. A long box, brown paper tied in red string, with a courier label that said it had been hand-delivered from Lower Manhattan. My name wasn't on it, but my curiosity was. I brought it in and put it on the marble stand in the hall as if it might leak moral influence on the rug. It did better. It leaked. Not much and not fast. One clear bead rolled from a corner, drew a tiny snail's track and gathered itself for the floor. I put a finger under it. The drop sat there like a guilty idea. It wasn't water. It had heft, and the faintest perfume that was not perfume. It was oil. Olive, if my tongue hasn't been wasting itself. Fritz, at my elbow, inhaled and went pale in the kind of way that makes you proud of your chef's nose. "Mon Dieu," he said, which is a brand of panic that has seen butter separate. "Mr. Goodwin, that is, if it is, olive oil," I said. "Don't faint. We can afford it." "The parcel," he insisted, "is the wrong temperature. The oil, listen, you hear nothing. There is no ice. An oil should not behave, so I'm not paid to wrangle with oil. I'm paid to open trouble and shut it later." I cut the string and folded back paper as clean as a shirt front, and lifted a lid that did not want to be lifted because the box had been packed to defend a single thing like a garrison. Inside was a long case of dark wood, fit with felt. Inside that, nested as if it had never seen light, was a chef's knife. You can tell a good knife the way you can tell a man who lies well, by the weight and by the balance and by how politely it doesn't slip. This one was honest. It had an ebony handle with 3 rivets and a blade that wanted to tell you about Paris and Lyon and a handful of other places where it had not actually been, because this blade was too new. Along the spine, someone had engraved a tiny laurel sprig. Along the edge was nothing. It had not cut so much as air. Wolfe could identify a truffle region by aroma from the far end of the room, but even I could have testified in court that this knife had done no work. Except it was dripping. The blade wore a sheen thick enough to move, a clear coat like varnish that kept gathering into drops along the heel and running toward the bolster. It was wrong, in the way a smile can be wrong when it belongs to the wrong face. Fritz made a noise not approved by doctors. I gave him a look to sit on it. "Archie," Wolfe said without moving his head, "bring it here. If you are about to tell me that some idiot has sent me a knife leaking its own lubricant, do not. I can observe." I took it to the desk with the care I reserve for gifts from strangers and women with husbands. Wolfe tilted his head, which is a larger event than other men standing up, and sniffed. Olive, he agreed, then narrowed his eyes. But not in the usual sense. That is not the residue of use. That is a deliberate application. A coating, why? I asked. Fritz had regained his voice. To prevent rust, he said promptly, or to prime the steel. But, mon Dieu, the parcel. This oil moves as if it were fresh, and yet look at the paper. There is no stain except... He pointed. On the inside of the outer wrapping, traced in oil and then smudged by the movement of the box, were 2 words in a tight, sharp hand. Without cutting. If you have a taste for titles, you could say it was the works, a good knife, a bad message, and the wrong address. Clever, Wolfe muttered. Inane, but clever. He touched the tip of a finger to the blade and then examined his skin. It shone. He did not wipe it on his handkerchief. He hates to watch linen suffer. Open the case further, Archie. There may be a note. There was, under the felt. It was short, which is one of the few attractions a note can have in Nero Wolfe's house. Mr. Wolfe, you don't know me, and I'm not asking you to. The knife is new. It is not cut, but it drips. Someone has already used another that did cut, but it did not drip. That difference is the whole thing. I can't come to you. Please hold this knife as proof that I'm not a liar. If I can, I'll send for it. Please don't name me, even to your assistant. A. Wolfe read it twice. The second time was to find places to disapprove of, which he did. Illiterate, he pronounced, and yet scrupulous. Fritz, stop hovering. Put down a tray, not silver, and bring a saucer. Archie, the courier label, I handed him the label. The sender was a caterer in the Woolworth building. The recipient was Nero Wolfe, in a type smaller than you'd use if you wanted to flatter him. He looked from the label to the knife and back, then at me. Archie, telephone the caterer. Ask for the person in charge. Do not mention knives. Ask if a parcel was sent to me today and at whose instruction. Right, I said, and went to the phone. The number came up on the first try, probably because the city loves food more than it loves art and keeps those lines clear. I spoke with a woman who had fed 100 people an hour ago and did not have more patience left for one. She said no parcel had gone to a private residence under the company's account. I asked who could have sent one under their roof without them. She said half the tenants in the building if they had the money to tip a messenger. I gave Wolfe the news. He nodded as if it were what he had ordered. The note is artless, he said, but the choice of courier source is not. The sender wanted plausibility's shadow. Fritz, our chef, had returned with a tray and a saucer. Wolfe took the knife, held it by the handle, and let a bead of oil fall onto porcelain. It gathered itself like a tiny lens. Goodness, he murmured. He dipped the corner of a paper scrap into the drop and held it up. Observe. The paper showed a faint ring shading to green. Basil, Fritz breathed, leaning in. Not leaf, but infusion. And lemon, and anise, Wolfe supplied, in whisper. A perfumer's olive oil. Or perhaps an olive oil a perfumer would pretend to blend if he had never tasted food. His eyes closed, not in pleasure. This is not kitchen oil. It's an idea. He opened his eyes again. Archie. We have a person calling himself A, terrified of being known, who has access to a kitchen or to a craftsman who makes a pretense of kitchens. He or she has seen 2 knives, one that cut and did not drip, and one that drips and has not cut. He believes the difference is the whole thing, which is sloppy but suggestive. What does that remind you of? Money, I said, because it reminds me of most things. Or theater, or evidence. Evidence, Wolfe agreed. Evidence presented and not used, and evidence used and not presented. He tapped the saucer. And the brownstone as repository. Phooey, if the reader thinks Wolfe relishes the brownstone as a public hall of justice, Let me save you a trip. He doesn't. He likes the world to come to him only when the world removes its shoes. The knife on his desk was wearing cleats. The bell rang again, and if you think I didn't look at Wolfe, you don't know us. He looked at me like a monarch looks at a weather report. I went. This time there was no parcel. There was a woman with a face that had learned how to keep from giving invitations while remaining polite enough to be invited anywhere. Late 30s, fair, in a navy suit that had been cut to look like it cost less than it did. She had a handbag and a way of holding it that told you she had not come to leave cards. "Mr. Goodwin?" she asked, as if we'd met twice and she had forgiven me for both times. "That's the rumor," I said. "You are?" "I'm not here," she said, "but I'm expected." She glanced past me and did not try to, which is the sort of social restraint that gets my attention. "May I?" You can argue with men about manners. With women like that, you just open the door. I took her into the office. Wolfe's eyes went from the knife to her face and back, which for him is a double header. "Good afternoon," he said. "You are here. Be comfortable, at least physically." He indicated the yellow chair. "Your name?" She sat. "I asked Mr. Goodwin outside for the favor of not existing," she said, "and I realize how that sounds in this room." She produced a card and put it on the edge of the desk. It read Amelia Vane in small type, with nothing else to help it. "Miss Vane," Wolfe said, "the universe is under no obligation to record your visit. I, however, am not the universe." He nudged the saucer with a finger. "You sent me a knife." Her eyelids fluttered once, which is one more flutter than a poker player allows. "I did," she admitted, "because I couldn't send you the other one. And because I needed to know if I was crazy. You are not," Wolfe said. "You are merely afraid." "Of whom and for what?" She looked at me, which is smart if you're deciding how much to be afraid. I gave her my best altar boy expression and kept my mouth shut. She turned back to Wolfe. "I manage front of house at Vessel's," she said. "If you eat, you know Vessel's. If you don't, you lie. For the last month, a patron has been pressing us. He wants something that isn't on the menu, not a dish, a service. He wants our kitchen to provide the setting for a business transaction that looks like catering but isn't. We refused. The next day, something happened that made saying no feel theatrical. She nodded at the knife. "That happened." "In your kitchen," Wolfe said. "In our kitchen," she confirmed, "but not from it." The knife appeared on the prep table for specials. Wrapped, dripping, everyone saw it. It made a little scene. There was oil on the tile, and you know what that means at Rush. I told everyone it was a supplier's mistake. I took the knife, and I kept it. That was 3 weeks ago. "And the other knife?" Wolfe asked. Her hands had been steady. They weren't. She pressed them together, then let them relax because she had technique. "The other knife was used a week later. Somewhere else. On someone I used to work with. It cut. There was blood. But when they found it, when the police found it, there was no trace like this. It was cleaned as if the act had been the dirt and the blade was a conscience. No oil, no anything." She swallowed. "And yesterday the man who has been pressing us sent me word through a reservation that I would enjoy it if I gave him back his property. He said, and I wrote it down as he said it, 'The one that drips without cutting.'" She stopped. The room did the thing it does when Wolfe is deciding whether he wishes to detest humanity or patronize it. He rested 2 fingertips on the desk and breathed. "You have given me," he said at last, "an annoyance." "I know," she said with a small worried smile that had been practiced or born. "But you haven't given me back the knife." "No," Wolfe said. "Archie." "Yes, sir?" "Miss Vane will remain nameless to you until I tell you otherwise. Arrange the yellow room. Fritz will send tea. Telephone Veselts and secure a reservation for 2 this evening at 7. You will take Miss Vane there. You will observe what is observable and what is not. You will not be seen to be observing." He turned his head to the window as if to confirm that the city was still outside. "We are not engaged," he added, "but we will be." Miss Vane sat up an inch. "You'll take it." "I will take it," Wolfe said, and his mouth got that small horizontal look it gets when he has already found the corner of the rug and is planning the tug. "For reasons I will not presently explain. They are sufficient for me." He eyed the knife again. "The man who uses a blade and leaves it as pure as theory is a moralist, and moralists are intolerable in kitchens and in commerce. I do not propose to let one export his ethic into my house by proxy." He closed his eyes, which is his signal that the world may stop making noise. When he opened them, he looked at me. "Archie," he said softly, "wipe that blade, wrap it, and lock it. Then get your hat." Amelia Vane didn't talk in the cab unless it was necessary, which put her near the top decile of women I ferried to a meal disguised as reconnaissance. She gave the driver the cross streets for Veselts and spent the ride watching the city in the windows, not the street, checking angles, not scenery. I let her do it. If a woman tells you she doesn't exist, the least you can do is not deprive her of reflections. Veselts does what good restaurants do when night falls. It pretends it invented light. The brass door caught us in a soft halo, and the carpet tried to convince my shoes that money is a texture. Inside, the sound was palate-tested. Forks self-censored to a polite ping. Voices clustered like conspirators who send themselves notes, and the lighting was so considered it could have been hired as counsel. A host with cheekbones and a pencil behind one ear approached as if he moonlighted as a valet for ducal ghosts. He recognized Amelia the way men recognize weather that has been announced. "Miss Vane," he said with a bow that did not spill into subservience. "We're pleased." "I'm not here," she murmured, and he edited the record on the spot. His smile became a professional non-committal. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, because of course I had acquired a name in the time it took him to breathe. "Your table." It was a two-top with flank coverage, wall at my back, glass at Amelia's, and a commanding view of the room that looked like an admiralty chart if you knew how to read it. She let me take the chair that gave me a mirror for the entrance and the kitchen door. She kept her handbag in her lap and didn't make a fuss about it. She had done this before. "Run me a thumbnail," I told her after the water had approved of us. "Names, functions, and who wishes, who ill." Her eyes went not quite soft. "You'll have to see them first," she said. "It's easier to stick labels on jars than on steam. But, on your left, corner banquette. The grey man with the haircut that cost him 2 hours and a justification to his barber is Victor Rook. He's the one who's been pressing us. Private equity. He owns 3 companies that own 7 more, and he thinks the world is a cutting board. He's charming to everyone who costs him money and savage to everyone who saves him some. Rook had the kind of tan that tells you about planes and golf and the sun's tolerance for checkbooks. He was alone, but his phone was at his right, like a familiar. The host stopped at his table for 10 seconds that counted. Across from Rook, 2 tables down, a woman of an age that fashions call undefinable and men call dangerous sat with the posture of someone who had been obeyed by better rooms. Amelia didn't need prompting. "Lenore Prentice," she said, "our silent partner. She supplies introductions and an alibi for the prices. She invests for reasons that are never strictly financial and always described as if they are." "Any reason for her to like Rook?" I asked. "She likes needing people who need her," Amelia said. "That's her sport." The sommelier slid toward us in approved glissando, slender dark hair combed as if wine had hands. He nodded to Amelia as to a colleague on shore leave. "Miss Vane," he said, and then to me, "A pleasure." He introduced himself as Julian Tuck, which matched the tie. He suggested a list the size of a summer novel and the weight of a doorstop. I told him we'd start modestly and ascend if the food demanded it. He approved, as if I had remembered please and thank you at the right ages, and drifted off. "Kitchen?" I asked. She tilted her chin toward the pass, a brass-framed rectangle through which the back of house sent its civilized missives. "Ilko Veselt is on the line tonight," she said. "He always is. He doesn't trust sous chefs because he used to be one. His right hand is Caspar Bell, who trusts no one who didn't bleed where he bled. Caspar was with me at a different place when—" She stopped, as clean as a cut. She breathed. "When Jaime was hurt." The name hung there like a coat that didn't belong on my peg. "Jaime Villar," she added, in a voice that had told the police the same thing and tried not to have intonation. "He ran garde-manger when I was at the Knickerbockers. Someone followed him into a service alley a week ago and opened him. The knife they found might have been the one, but it had been washed like an apology." "Is he dead?" I asked. "No." Her hands tightened on the handbag and smoothed it again. "He's in the hospital saying he slipped, which is the sort of lie you tell when you intend to live." "And Rook?" I said. "Rook has fingers in a launch we were asked to host in our private dining room." The words got their own quotation marks from her mouth. "Not food." An introduction with contracts and a demonstration that apparently required panache and plausible deniability. I told him no. He smiled at the room and told me to ask again. Then the knife appeared. A busboy arrived with bread to give us privacy from our own topic. Amelia broke a piece and didn't eat it. I did my best to honor the farm that had grown the olives in the dish and found my mouth remembering Wolfe's saucer. The oil here was the honest sort, greener on the tongue, no perfumer's whisper, kitchen oil that had learned work. "Your other suspects," I said, "besides Mr. Rook, who wears entitlement like a well-tailored rash." "Julian," she said, surprising me. "He's exceptional, and he needs a raise we can't give him unless he does something dramatic with our margins. Caspar, because he believes control is a spice. Ilko, because every genius in a kitchen flirts with the idea that the dining room is a stage for his private morality. And there's Armando Pirro." She nodded at a man in shirt sleeves at the corner of the bar with forearms that had carried crates and a smile that had carried debts. "Distributes specialty oils and vinegars and anything else you can pour into glass and sell at a premium. He provided that basil anointing you sniffed. He did not send it to our prep table." "Confident?" I asked. "He wouldn't risk the relationship," she said, "unless he already thought it was gone and wanted a souvenir." The first course glided in with the arrogance of things that have earned it. Amelia could run a front. The plates arrived as if the kitchen and the room were agreeing in public. I ate, because a man doesn't do useful thinking on an empty stomach, even if Wolfe believes thinking is a separate species from eating. Amelia watched Rook not watch her. He was the sort of man who thinks surveillance works better when you never lift your eyes. Julian returned with our wine and gave us a bottle lecture that was informative without being a sermon. As he poured, his cuff rode up. There was a square of gauze on, his wrist under flesh-colored tape. He saw me see it and smiled because he knew how to turn a disadvantage into charm. "Mandolin met flesh," he said lightly. "I lost. The fennel won." "I'll send flowers," I told him, "for the fennel." He laughed appropriately and moved on. Amelia's mouth tightened for a second too short for anyone who wasn't facing her full time. Caspar emerged into the pass to bark something at a line cook and vanished. At the bar, Armando Pirro traded murmurs with the host and left money that didn't want to be seen. Lenore Prentice took a call she pretended not to take. Rook's phone remained on the table like a second-place setting. If this room had a pulse, it thudded under the linen. Halfway through the second course, the host reappeared with the sober briskness of a man who has to translate the world into 3 sentences and a smile. He leaned to Amelia. "Miss Vane?" he said sotto. "A delivery came without a name." It was left at the coat check. I asked them to hold it. "It's addressed to front of house." Amelia didn't move any visible muscle. "What is it?" "A small parcel," he said. "Long." We looked at each other a fraction longer than etiquette allows. "Archie?" she asked, level. "I'll stroll," I said, and strolled, because running in a dining room is what amateurs do when they want to bake panic at 400 degrees. The coat check girl had eyes like a basset hound and sense like a librarian. She produced a plain envelope with the elegant scrawl of someone who expected the world to open on ink. It did not contain steel. It contained a card and a ribbon cut from red string. On the card, in the same narrow hand that had written for Wolfe, were 3 words: "Return what drips." I put the card back in its envelope, told the girl she was a paragon, and brought it to the table. Amelia read it, exhaled once through her nose, and took a swallow of wine that would have insulted a lesser vintage. "He wants his property," she said quietly, "and he believes I brought it." "He's wrong on both counts," I said, "but he's right that he can make a mess if he wants to." "Will he?" she asked, "in a room this manicured?" "Not unless he intends to own it by morning." I slid the envelope into my jacket. "Finish your meal. We'll go say hello to the kitchen and let them see us not mislaying parcels. Then I'll take you to a cab and call my sedentary commander with a bedtime story." She smiled, and it was faint and real, the kind you earn by not being an idiot when it's inconvenient. "He'll already be awake," she said. "Men like Mr. Wolfe don't sleep when ideas are dripping." "They sleep," I told her. "They just make you think they're thinking while they do it." We finished, and the room kept pretending it didn't care who owned it. It's a good room. It would care soon. I took Amelia out the side door on 54th because a woman who's just been handed an anonymous demand for contraband doesn't need a parade through the dining room. The cab came easy, the city being in one of its cooperative moods, and I saw her off with the sort of hand squeeze you give when words will only bruise. She said nothing, just looked back once as the taxi pulled into traffic, like someone checking whether a bridge was going to hold after they'd crossed it. I stayed on the curb until the yellow taillight disappeared. Then I went hunting for a phone. There are calls I make in Wolfe's name and calls I make in mine. This one I made in mine. The connection rattled a bit before his baritone arrived, but when it did, it carried more vinegar than wine. "Archie?" "Reporting, sir." We had a full house. Rook, Prentice, the sommelier with the designer bandage, the distributor with the ready smile, and the chef with a chip big enough to flavor stock. All alive, all apparently complicit in nothing but dining. Until the coat check delivered a note that says, "In case you missed the theme, return what drips." There was silence, but not the empty kind. It was Wolfe's thinking silence, the one that could stop a dog from barking. When he spoke, the syllables were as precise as salt grains on the rim of a glass. Delivered at a moment calculated to reach Miss Vane, to confirm her trepidation, and to test her allegiance. "You still have it?" "In my pocket," I said. "If you'd like me to sleep with it under my pillow, I can." "That won't be necessary." "Bring it directly here. We will add it to the knife and the note as a triad of idiocies. I take it you're not packing for a visit to Wiesel's yourself." "Pfui," he said, which means no with aromatic disgust. "Return at once. And Archie, observe whether you are followed. If our adversary believes the brownstone to be his locker, he may wish to confirm the knife is still in residence." I said I would and meant it, though I wasn't eager to test the theory. The city at night offers more tales than a dog show, and a man has to pick his alleys carefully. I worked my way back with 3 unnecessary turns, 1 unnecessary coffee, and a glance in every dark pane of glass. Nobody cared about me but the pigeons, and they've never written notes in basil oil. By the time I pushed open the door at West 35th, Fritz was in the hall with eyebrows that had decided they didn't approve of my schedule. He took my coat like it owed him money and vanished toward the kitchen. I went on to the office. The knife was still on Wolfe's desk, wrapped and resting on the saucer as if it had been given a parole. The note was beside it, and Wolfe sat back with eyes that had settled into their geometry. I handed him the envelope. He took it between forefinger and thumb like an entomologist accepting a specimen, slit it with a paper knife, and read. Then he read it again. Then he closed his eyes. "You observed them all," he said, still with his eyes shut, as much as one can without ordering binoculars. Rook plays king without subjects, Prentice plays duchess without country, Tuck the sommelier wears his gauze like a boutonniere, Caspar balks and disappears, Armando Piro drinks with the host and leaves money like breadcrumbs. And Amelia, Miss Vane, was a picture of calm except for the small matter of her pulse when she saw the card. "You approve of her composure?" Wolfe asked. "I approve of her honesty about being rattled. She didn't try to make a scene or deny what we both saw. That alone puts her ahead of half the city." His lips pursed. "And the kitchen?" "Running, but tight." Vaselt at the line, Caspar seconding him. No evidence of knives being smuggled out with the soufflés. But if a man wanted to slip something into a coat-room envelope, he had the chance. He opened his eyes. They were steady and opaque. "We now have 2 knives. One theoretical, one real. One cut and was cleaned. One drips but has not cut. We have a victim who denies his own injury, a woman who brings us a blade like an orphan, and a businessman who believes himself owed a toy, and we have an adversary who wishes to unsettle us in our own house." "You mean the brownstone?" "I mean me," he said flatly. "Pooey. It is a vulgar trick to send anonymous admonitions where they are least wanted. I do not forgive vulgarity." He tapped the desk with 2 fingers. "Archie, tomorrow you will visit Jaime Villar at the hospital. He's a stubborn fool if he claims he slipped on his own entrails, but he is our only witness to the knife that cut. You will extract from him, with such tact as you can counterfeit, whether he recognizes the hand that wields it." "Sure," I said. "What do I use if he's still in a mood to protect his assailant?" "Use your tongue," Wolfe said. "It has gotten you in and out of more trouble than any knife. If persuasion fails, Saul will apply his own methods. I shall send for him." He leaned back, settled his head, and folded his hands like a man preparing to sleep upright, but his voice was sharp as needles. "This is not a murder case, Archie. Not yet. But it is a case of principle. A knife is not merely a utensil. It is a tool in which human intention is distilled. Whoever uses one to impose an ethic of cleanliness after blood is a fanatic, and fanatics are enemies of civilization. I will not allow such a person to dictate terms in my domain." "Then you're in," I said. "Officially." "I was in the moment the box crossed my threshold," he replied. "But now I'm affronted. And affront is a motive that brooks no postponement. Tomorrow, Villar. Tonight, bring Fritz the remains of that oil on porcelain. He will analyze, and I shall contemplate." He closed his eyes again. "Leave me." So I did, with the knife locked, the note stored, and the envelope filed among Wolfe's growing library of insults. I went upstairs to my room and lay there, listening to the city hum and wondering whether I'd wake to find another parcel under the door. When you start collecting knives that haven't cut, you half expect one that has. The next morning began with the usual breakfast choreography. Wolfe with his soft-boiled eggs, Fritz presiding like a priest over a sacrament, and me trying to remember which paper was worth pretending to read while I waited for my marching orders. Wolfe didn't mention knives, oil, or dripping fanatics. That meant he was thinking, which is about the only form of exercise he allows himself before noon. When the second cup of coffee landed, he finally moved. "Archie," he said, as if I might not respond to my own name, "you will call on Mr. Villar as soon as you leave this table. The hospital will have visiting hours commencing shortly after 10. You will be present when they do. He will be evasive." "Correct him," I saluted with the spoon. Yes, sir. Shall I also charm the nurses? Charm whomever you wish, provided you return with what I require, the truth about the knife that cut. That was my cue. I put on a tie that might pass for respectful and took the subway to Bellevue, where the halls smell like antiseptic mixed with exhaustion. It didn't take long to locate Jaime Villar. He was propped up in bed with the kind of posture that says he's already tired of pretending to be grateful for survival. His skin was pale, his hair stuck in angles, and his eyes went narrow when he saw me. "Who are you?" he asked. "Goodwin. Archie Goodwin. I'm not with the police, if that helps." "That doesn't help," he said. His voice had the rasp of a man who'd argued too long with doctors. "I don't need another investigator." "You don't need one, but you've got one." "I work for Nero Wolfe." The name had the usual effect. He stiffened, as if someone had whispered he was sitting on a wire. "Wolfe doesn't waste time on men like me." "Wolfe wastes less than anyone," I told him. "Which means if he's interested, you're suddenly in the high-rent district. So let's not pretend you slipped in an alley. We both know better." He looked at the ceiling. "Slipped is what it says in the report. And Santa Claus files it every year. Look, Jaime, the difference between a man who slipped and a man who was cut is the difference between an accident and an enemy. I need the name of your enemy. Or at least a hint. A shape. Something." His eyes came back to me, sharp, but he didn't answer. Silence can be a wall or a lever, depending how you lean on it. I leaned. "You worked with Amelia Vane. She still thinks enough of you to lose sleep. She brought Wolfe a knife that drips oil and hasn't cut a thing. She says the knife that cut you was its twin, but clean to the bone. If you're protecting someone, you're protecting a man who doesn't deserve it. You still bleeding for him? That got him?" His hand twitched at the blanket. "She shouldn't have." He stopped himself. "She did," I said. "And it means she still thinks you matter. So you can sit here and sulk about reports, or you can tell me who pressed that blade. Because he's pressing others, and Wolfe doesn't let men like that press indefinitely." Jaime's mouth twisted. "You think talking will fix this? You think Wolfe can keep Rook out of a kitchen, out of a room?" So there it was. Rook, the tan, the smile, the equity grin. I didn't react, just waited. "I didn't see his hand," Jaime went on, "but I saw the shadow. It was his man, or someone paid to be his hand. I knew better than to take that alley, but I wanted to prove I wasn't afraid. That's what you get for pride." "Describe the knife," I said, saying. He hesitated, then gave in. "Long, new ebony handle, balance like a dancer." Same as what Amelia described, but when I saw it after, when the police held it up, it was spotless. Clean as if it had never cut. That's what scared me more than the wound. Like he'd erased it, like it was philosophy. Who cleaned it? "That's the question," Jaime muttered. "Cops don't ask it. They just log evidence. But someone did. And someone wanted me to stay quiet." "Why?" He laughed once, bitter. "Because if I said his name, he'd make sure I didn't say anything again. Rook doesn't play fair. He doesn't play at all. He collects, I let that sit. He wasn't going to give me more without something in return, and Wolfe wouldn't want me trading away promises I couldn't keep." I stood. "You've done your part, Jaime. I'll carry it back. You just carry on breathing." Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened to my report without interruption. When I finished, he shut his eyes, breathed deep, and delivered judgment. "As expected," he said. "Mr. Rook uses hands, not his own. The knife is an emblem, not a tool. The oil is a signature, not a seasoning. And the victim is a fool who prefers pride to prudence." "Do we call the cops?" I asked. "No. They will achieve nothing. They will hold the knife that cut and marvel at its cleanliness. They will hold the knife that drips and dismiss it as a prank. Only intellect will serve. He rang for Fritz, who appeared with the silent precision of a man who has heard the bell all his life. Wolfe instructed him to bring the saucer. Fritz did, eyes down. Wolfe studied the dried residue. Basil. Lemon. Anise, he repeated. Perfume disguised as oil. Not a chef's work, but someone who wants to pretend intimacy with kitchens. That is our adversary's hallmark. A dilettante moralist with money and ambition enlisting others to soil their hands while he preserves his own. I leaned on the desk. So we've got suspects enough for a bridge game. What's next? He opened his eyes, slow and heavy. Next, we position. Saul will follow. Rook. You will return to Vesselt's under pretense of dining again and observe Tuck and Pirro. Prentice I shall summon here when the time is ripe, and Miss Vane will remain our reluctant courier, since she has already compromised herself. And the knife? He looked at it as if it were an insult carved in steel. We keep it until its owner comes to claim it in person. Which Archie? He will. The Vane always do. That was Wolfe, sitting, thinking, while the city sharpened its edges. And me, already bracing to walk back into a room where knives moved like ideas and men pretended they were clean. The next evening I walked back into Vesselt's with the sort of appetite that was mostly curiosity. Wolfe had laid it out like a chess move. Saul would shadow Rook, I'd keep my eyes on the sommelier and the oil man, and Wolfe would remain exactly where he belonged, immovable in his chair, directing traffic by inference. Miss Vane hadn't been summoned, which I guessed was her reward for handing over the knife. Wolfe wasn't about to spend her composure all at once. The place was busy again, the dining room a polished symphony of forks and murmurs. I took a table solo, which doesn't draw suspicion when you've got the look of a man on business. The host gave me a glance that remembered me from the night before, but his smile didn't change key. He seated me near the bar, close enough that Armando Pirro's back filled half my sight line. Pirro was laughing low with a couple of men I didn't know, tapping the bar with 2 fingers for emphasis like he was conducting some invisible orchestra. He had the posture of someone who'd grown comfortable selling more than olive oil. Julian Tuck came by my table as if on cue. His bandage had been replaced with something smaller, just a strip of white under the cuff. But I didn't miss it. He leaned with the easy grace of a man who thought wine was as good an entrance as charm. Mr. Goodwin, back so soon? I'm loyal once I find a place, I said. Thought I'd give your cellar another chance to impress me. He smiled, pleased. Then you'll forgive me if I take liberties. He wrote something on his pad with a flourish, as if wine choices were sonnets. He asked about my meal. I made a choice that wouldn't draw comment, and he drifted off with a bow. Pirro got up a few minutes later. He left his glass half full and strolled toward the restrooms. I gave him 30 seconds and followed. Wolfe would have scolded me for impatience, but sometimes you have to let the field report itself. Pirro wasn't in the men's room. He was further down, past the staff entrance, one arm against the wall, speaking into a phone. His voice was low, but not low enough. No, it's still at the brownstone, he hesitated. Yes, the one that drips. Don't be stupid. She doesn't have it anymore. I told you she handed it off. That's why I'm watching. That was enough to make my pulse lean forward. I retreated a step before he could notice. The line cook who came bustling with trays gave me cover, and by the time Pirro hung up, I was already back at my table, looking innocent over a bread basket. He returned to the bar, face smooth but shoulders tight. The meal arrived, and I pretended to give it my full devotion. Meanwhile, Julian passed between tables with a sommelier's smile and eyes that lingered where they shouldn't. He checked Pirro once, twice. Not long, but long enough to be a signal if you were counting. I was. Halfway through, Caspar Bell appeared at the pass, barking at a junior cook about garnish like it was a military offense. He glanced once at the room, at Pirro, and then caught sight of me, his mouth pressed flat like recognition without welcome. He vanished back behind the kitchen doors. That was another link in the chain. I ate, paid, and left a tip that said I was respectable but not extravagant. Outside, the air was cool, and the traffic noise was generous enough to cover the sound of footsteps behind me. I walked 3 blocks, cut down an alley, and doubled back. Sure enough, Pierrot's shape turned the corner half a minute later, his head moving with the rhythm of someone who hadn't realized I'd reversed the dance. He passed without spotting me. I let him go, satisfied, then circled back to the subway. When I returned to the brownstone, Wolfe was still in his chair, surrounded by the stillness that only an orchid room or his office can manage. He opened his eyes when I entered, which was his way of saying hurry. I laid it out. Pierrot's phone call, his certainty that the knife was here, the connection to a higher authority, Julian's looks, Casper's recognition. Wolfe listened with his lids lowered, fingers steepled. When I finished, he sighed, which was his idea of applause. "Predictable," he said, "but not trivial. Pierrot is courier and sentinel, not originator. He informs someone who believes the knife is a talisman." Julian's glances. A man who bleeds conveniently and wishes to be noticed. Casper, loyal to Vesselt, but perhaps resentful of intrusions. And Rook, at the center, or so he imagines. "Saul?" I asked. He reported by telephone an hour ago. Rook met with Prentice this afternoon. They spoke of a launch. Ambiguous, but it reeks of contrivance. She is his purse, but not his partner. She resists, yet indulges. Saul will continue. I dropped into the red chair. So Pierrot's been tailing me, and he knows the knife is here. That means Rook's people are watching the brownstone. "Yes," Wolfe said. "They are trespassing already. A violation I do not accept. It is time to invert the arrangement. Tomorrow evening, Archie, we shall invite them here. Who, exactly?" "All of them. Miss Vane, Mr. Rook, Mrs. Prentice, Mr. Tuck, Mr. Pierrot, Mr. Bell, and Vesselt, if he can be pried from his stove. They will sit where you sit now, and they will listen while I dissect their pretenses. The knife will be in plain sight. They will betray themselves by posture and word. And I shall name the one who believes cleanliness absolves blood." "That's quick," I said. He opened his eyes and pinned me. "It must be. They have already marked us. Delay would invite escalation. Better that the matter be resolved under my roof, where I command the terms." "Fine," I said. "But if they all come, this office is going to look like a courtroom with bad lighting." "Then you will provide chairs," Wolfe said, and closed his eyes again. I knew the signal. I left him to his thoughts, but I couldn't help glancing at the safe where the knife sat. If Wolfe was right, the next night it would be more than an exhibit. It would be bait, and every person who wanted it would walk straight into Wolfe's web. And I'd be the one holding the threads until he gave the word to pull. The following day had a feel to it, the kind of weight you notice before a storm. Wolfe didn't leave his chair, naturally, but he had me and Fritz in motion from morning. Fritz fussed over the arrangement of the office as if the quality of canapes determined the quality of deduction, and I hauled chairs up from the dining room. Wolfe surveyed the seating plan like a general deciding where to place artillery. "Victor Rook will be on the yellow chair," he said, pointing with the end of his pencil. He believes himself central. "Give him the illusion. Mrs. Prentice across from him, so her disdain will not be wasted. Mr. Tuck at the far left, a sommelier understands corners. Mr. Pierrot beside him, since confidences pass easily when men are near elbow to elbow. Mr. Bell closer to the kitchen door, where he may imagine escape. Vesselt beside him, but half-turned, as if still tethered to his stove. Miss Vane here, between myself and the door. She's both courier and witness." I raised a brow. "And me?" "You will remain mobile," he said. "There are times when only motion can punctuate stillness." By 6 o'clock the air had settled into the brownstone's particular silence, which has a way of making visitors aware of their own noise. At 7 sharp, the bell began its procession. Fritz admitted them one by one, announcing names with a solemnity that turned the front hall into a stage. Rook came first, smile polished, hands empty, a tan that seemed brighter under our lamplight. He nodded to me as though we were equals in some club neither of us wanted to admit existed. Prentice followed, draped in confidence and pearls. Her eyes swept the office with cool interest as though it were a restaurant she might choose to buy. Tuck entered with a bottle under his arm, the bandage gone, replaced by a faint scar he displayed as casually as a boutonniere. Pierrot trailed him, grinning too wide, smelling faintly of citrus oil. Bell came next, shoulders squared like a boxer waiting for a bell, and Vesselt himself last, wiping his hands on a towel as if he'd brought the kitchen with him. Amelia Vane slipped in with less ceremony, eyes steady but pale, handbag clasped like a lifeline. They filled the room as directed, though not without glances that suggested they wondered who had arranged their seating. Wolfe let the silence extend until it bent. Then he opened his eyes. "You are here," he said, as though that was the indictment. "You wonder why? You suspect why. I shall tell you, because a knife has entered my house unbidden, and with it a presumption. It drips though it has not cut, its twin cut though it does not drip. This paradox offends me, and it touches each of you." The knife lay on the desk in plain view, wrapped but visible. Rook's eyes flicked to it once, quick as a tell, then returned to Wolfe with his smile intact. "You can't mean we're responsible for a parcel you received," Rook said smoothly. "Surely this is eccentric." "Phooey," Wolfe replied. "Do not insult me with platitudes. Each of you has handled this affair, whether with intent or in cowardice. Mr. Villar lies in hospital because one knife was used and another displayed. Miss Vane received one and concealed it. Mr. Pierrot has been watching, reporting. Mr. Tuck bleeds conveniently. Mr. Bell resents intrusion. Mr. Vesselt resents dependence. Mrs. Prentice supplies purse and sanction. And you, Mr. Rook, imagine yourself conductor that rearranged the air." Prentice's brows arched. Pierrot shifted. Tuck smoothed his cuff. Rook didn't move, but his smile thinned. "You've been misinformed," Rook said lightly. "Business interests are sometimes misunderstood. What does a knife matter?" "It matters," Wolfe said, "because it was made to matter. A symbol, a token, dripping oil infused with herbs, perfume masquerading as provenance, a deliberate signature. Someone wished us to see virtue in restraint, the knife that drips without cutting, as opposed to its twin, which cut but left no trace. The philosophy is transparent, to kill cleanly, without residue, to make the act vanish. It is the doctrine of a fanatic, and fanatics are intolerable." Amelia's breath caught, but Wolfe ignored her. His gaze rested on Tuck. "A convenient cut on your wrist, Mr. Tuck, shown too readily. A signal, perhaps? A way to demonstrate membership in a creed of cleanliness?" Tuck lifted his hands, smiling. "I cut myself slicing fennel. That's all. If I wanted to impress someone, I'd use wine, not wounds." Wolfe's gaze shifted to Pierrot. "And you, sir? Your tongue is looser than your discretion. You told someone the knife was here, in this house. Who was it? Rook? Or another?" Pierrot's grin faltered. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You do," Wolfe said. His voice was low, but it carried weight. "You spoke in the corridor of Vesselt's." "It's still at the brownstone," you said. "I do not guess. I know the room stirred." Rook's smile slipped a degree. Prentice tapped one pearl against another, a sound as sharp as coins. Vesselt frowned, his chef's pride affronted by the intrusion of politics into kitchens. Bell sat rigid, fists closed on his knees. "Enough," Rook said suddenly, the smile gone. "You drag us here to scold? You think words undo business? I think words reveal men, Wolfe said. He leaned forward half an inch, which for him was thunder. And I think your philosophy has already failed. You wished for a knife that cut and left no stain, but the stain exists, in fear, in silence, in the hospital bed where Jaime Villar lies. Your concealment is imperfect. Your creed is nonsense. Rook opened his mouth, but Prentice spoke first. Her voice was cool and final. Victor, stop! This has gone far enough. He turned to her, startled. She met his gaze without blinking. You wanted to use Veselt's as your theater. You wanted spectacle without consequence. But consequence always arrives, no matter how you scrub. She shifted her eyes to Wolfe. I'll not fund it. My involvement ends. Silence fell like a curtain. Rook's jaw tightened. His hand twitched toward the knife, then stopped. Wolfe saw it, of course, and his lip curled. You will not touch it, Wolfe said. It is not yours. It never was. It was sent here to bait arrogance. And arrogance has come. The room breathed again. Rook leaned back, masking anger with calm. Pirro looked away. Tuck shifted uneasily. Bell stared at the floor. Veselt folded his arms. Amelia sat with her eyes closed. Wolfe closed his own eyes, signaling the session's end. Tomorrow, he said, we will speak further. Tonight you may depart. It was dismissal, pure and cold. They rose, uneasy, and filed out under Fritz's watchful eye. Rook lingered half a second at the door, then left without a word. The brownstone was quiet again, but the air still hummed. Wolfe opened his eyes and met mine. It is nearly finished, he said softly, but not yet. Tomorrow, Archie. Tomorrow we pluck the root. The brownstone had never felt more like a vault than it did after they left. Wolfe didn't move for several minutes, eyes shut, lips pressed together in the line that means he's filing everything into his mind like a librarian with steel drawers. I didn't interrupt. Fritz had retreated to the kitchen, his dignity intact, but his nerves probably needing a restorative glass. When Wolfe finally opened his eyes, he gave me one of those looks that tells you you've been hired again, in case you forgot. They will not sleep well tonight, he said. Neither will I if you keep me guessing, I told him. You rattled them. Rook was ready to lunge. Prentice cut him down with a sentence. Pirro looked like a boy who's lost his homework. If you've got the answer already, why not unload it? Because, Wolfe said, certainty is not enough. It must be demonstrable. Tonight they showed their nerves. Tomorrow we show their guilt. Tomorrow is vague, I reminded him. He ignored me, which is his preferred method of instruction. He leaned back, closed his eyes again, and folded his hands. The knife sat on the desk, quiet, but it drew the room's attention like a lodestone. I locked it in the safe before I went upstairs, but not before noticing Wolfe's glance following it, as if he were locking away, not just a piece of evidence, but a principle. Morning came without surprises. Breakfast was eggs again, which meant Wolfe wasn't rattled. But when the mail arrived, it included a small envelope, cream paper, unmarked. Fritz delivered it to Wolfe, who sniffed it with distaste before handing it to me. Open it, Archie. I did. Inside was a card in the same narrow hand as before. Just 4 words. The clean one wins. I whistled low. They're still playing games. What's this supposed to mean? That their vanity persists, Wolfe said. They believe themselves superior because they have erased traces. They mistake concealment for victory. He reached for the card, glanced at it once, then tossed it to the corner of the desk as if it were a receipt. Call Saul. Ask him whether Mr. Rook made any visits after leaving here last night. Saul reported promptly. Rook had gone to a private club downtown, met with 2 men in suits, stayed an hour, then returned home. No evidence of direct plotting, but his agitation was visible even in the way he smoked. Wolfe nodded at the report as though it confirmed more than it told. "And me?" I asked. "You," Wolfe said, "will return to Vessel's this evening. Alone, but attentive. They will feel the absence of Miss Vane and of the others. Mr. Tuck or Mr. Pirro will make a move. You will observe it, I didn't argue." At 7, I was back under the chandeliers, ordering a meal I didn't care about. The host's smile was thinner this time, his eyes calculating. Tuck appeared at my elbow with almost unseemly speed, his scar catching the light. "Goodwin," he said smoothly. "Twice in 1 week? You'll have people talking, let them," I said. "Maybe they'll say you pour the best Bordeaux in the city." He smiled, poured, lingered. "Last night was unusual," he murmured. "Not often one dines with Wolfe." "I don't recommend it unless you like indigestion," I said. "Or unless you like certainty," he countered. His eyes flicked to my jacket pocket. "You're still carrying his property?" That froze my fork mid-air. I put it down slowly. "What property would that be?" He didn't answer. He only smiled again, a little too wide, and moved off to another table. That was enough for me. I stayed through the entree, but my attention was on him. He drifted toward the bar where Pirro was waiting, and they spoke in low tones. I caught only one word: clean. It was enough. I left without dessert and doubled back 2 blocks, watching in a shop window. Sure enough, Pirro and Tuck slipped out 10 minutes later and walked together down the street. I followed at distance, past 2 corners, until they entered a narrow building with no sign but a brass number. I noted it, then headed back to the brownstone. Wolfe listened while I reported, eyes closed, hands folded. When I finished, he spoke at once. They gather privately, to reassure one another and to scheme. It will not serve them. Tomorrow evening, Archie, we shall summon them all again. This time the demonstration will not be words. We will make them show the stain they believe erased. And how do you plan to do that? By forcing choice, Wolfe said. The knife will drip again, but not oil. That was Wolfe at his most ominous. Calm, measured, and hinting at something already decided. I knew better than to ask more. He had his plan. Tomorrow would be the last act, and the brownstone would once again be the stage where men destroyed themselves by believing Wolfe had left them options. I locked the knife away for the night, but I couldn't shake the sense that it was waiting for what Wolfe had promised. And I couldn't shake the thought that whoever had written "The Clean One Wins" was about to discover just how dirty truth can be. The next evening the brownstone was dressed for judgment. Wolfe hadn't moved all afternoon except to dictate letters of no consequence, but his mind was grinding like a millstone. He had ordered Fritz to prepare a setting in the office once again, and I repeated my chair-hauling duties. The knife was retrieved from the safe and set upon the desk, gleaming under the lamps, wrapped but visible enough to tempt eyes. It looked less like evidence than a lure, and that was exactly what Wolfe intended. By 7, they came. Rook first, jaw tight, smile absent this time. Prentice arrived behind him, aloof and impenetrable. Tuck wore a sharper suit, his scar displayed like a medal. Pirro looked too cheerful, which meant he was nervous. Vesselt and Bell together, smelling faintly of kitchens and smoke. And Amelia Vane, last, her calm veneer thinner now, though she carried herself as if she were still hosting the front of a dining room. They filled the seats again, though more stiffly than before, and the office air tightened with their unease. Wolfe opened his eyes and regarded them as if they were ingredients in a pot he was about to season. "You are here again," he said evenly. "That is as it must be. The farce has persisted long enough. Tonight we resolve it." Rook leaned forward, restless. "You've dragged us here twice, Wolfe. If you've something to say, say it," I will, Wolfe replied, but you will first indulge me in an exercise. Archie, bring the saucer. I fetched it from the side table, placing it before Wolfe. He lifted the knife, unwrapped it, and tilted the blade. A bead of oil gathered and fell onto porcelain with a small, definite sound. The drop shone under the lamp, clear as glass, before spreading slowly. Observe, Wolfe said. This oil, perfumed with basil, lemon, anise. It drips as it has since it arrived. Yet this blade is not cut. It is an emblem, meant to taunt us with restraint. Its twin, however, was used to wound Mr. Villar. That blade was cleaned to sterile perfection, as though the act itself were dirt to be scrubbed. The philosophy is plain. One knife drips without cutting, the other cuts without dripping. Together, they form a creed: kill, erase, and leave only purity. Pierrot shifted uncomfortably. Tuck's eyes narrowed. Prentice crossed her legs with elegance, but her pearls clicked faintly. Wolfe's gaze turned to Rook. You, sir, are not clever enough to invent this creed. You require spectacle, not subtlety. You are a patron, a conductor, but not the author. Rook sneered. You think I'd waste time with kitchen games? My interests are business. Precisely, Wolfe said. You supply funding and pressure, but you need acolytes who make a doctrine of knives. That brings us to Mr. Tuck and Mr. Pierrot. Tuck straightened. I pour wine, Wolfe, not philosophy. And yet, Wolfe said, you bleed conspicuously. You show a scar as if it were membership, and you were seen last night, whispering with Pierrot in a private house, using the word clean. He turned his head, heavy and deliberate, toward Pierrot. And you, sir, told another that the knife was here. You watch, you report. You serve. Pierrot's grin cracked. I don't. Silence, Wolfe snapped. You betray yourself with noise. You both serve an ethic, but not your own. Who supplied the knives? The room froze. No one answered. Wolfe's eyes moved to Veselt and Bell. Not you. You resent intrusion, not embrace it. Mrs. Prentice. You enable, you indulge, but you do not invent. Miss Vane? You resisted, wisely. Which leaves us with a single conclusion. The hand that conceived this doctrine stands among you, hiding behind your roles, your commerce, your theatre. He let the silence stretch, then dropped his voice. It is you, Mr. Tuck. The sommelier's smile faltered for the first time. That's absurd. No, Wolfe said. It is inevitable. You're the only one with daily access to knives without suspicion. You're the only one who can anoint a blade with oil infused to smell of cuisine but reeking of affectation. You're the only one who bleeds and displays it, turning accident into creed. You believe in cleanliness. You seek to erase act and leave only symbol. Rook supplied money, Pierrot supplied eyes, but you supplied doctrine. Amelia gasped. Prentice leaned forward, eyes sharp. Rook turned on Tuck, expression twisted with betrayal. You fool, Rook hissed. You made me part of your obsession. Tuck's calm cracked. He rose, hands spread. It isn't obsession. It's refinement, violence without stain, action without consequence. A philosophy kitchens should admire. Perfect efficiency, nothing wasted, nothing lingering. His voice shook with conviction. The knife proves it. One drips, one does not. Purity is power, pui, Wolfe said, his voice thick with contempt. You call it purity, I call it cowardice. To kill and erase is not refinement, it is evasion. Civilization rests on the record of act, not its denial. You are a fanatic, Mr. Tuck, and fanatics rot whatever they touch. Tuck's eyes darted to the knife. His hand twitched, but before he could move, I stepped forward and put mine on his shoulder. Sit down, pal, I said softly. The show's over. He sagged, suddenly deflated, and dropped back into the chair. Pierrot looked away. Rook cursed under his breath. Prentice sat back, satisfied. Vesselt muttered in disgust. Amelia closed her eyes, relief flickering across her face. Wolfe leaned back, folding his hands. Tomorrow I will inform the police. They may sneer at philosophy, but they will understand evidence. The knife that cut is sterile, but the man who devised its creed is not. His words tonight will suffice. He closed his eyes. You may all go. No one lingered. They filed out, some shaken, some furious, some quietly relieved. Tuck was last, his head bowed, his creed collapsing around him. When the door shut, the brownstone returned to its silence. Wolfe exhaled, slow and final. So ends the matter. The knife that dripped without cutting was never about oil. It was about vanity. And vanity, Archie, always drips. I locked the blade away again, feeling the tension ease from the air. Wolfe reached for his beer, and Fritz appeared with a tray as if on cue. Dinner followed, quiet and composed, and though the city outside still churned with business and knives, the brownstone was whole again, its sanctity restored by the man who never leaves his chair, and the words that cut deeper than steel. When they had all gone, the brownstone seemed to exhale. The room smelled faintly of oil and nerves, and the chairs were still warm from bodies that had shifted under Wolfe's words. I poured myself a drink and stayed standing. Wolfe sat with his eyes closed, which meant he was not finished. When he did open them, he looked at me as if I were the court stenographer who'd failed to get every word down. You heard him, Wolfe said. I did, I replied. And if you're asking whether I think Tuck hung himself with his own rope, yes. He was practically handing you the noose. Wolfe's lips pursed. He revealed not only his creed, but his vanity. He wished to be understood, even while cornered. That is the fatal impulse of the zealot. However, zealots rarely act alone. I frowned. You think he's got a partner other than Rook and Pierrot? Not think. No, Wolfe's voice dropped lower, steady. Mr. Tuck could not have procured twin knives of such quality without assistance. He is a sommelier, not a smith. Someone placed the instruments in his hand. Someone supplied, advised, encouraged Prentice, I asked. No, she is opportunist, not architect. Her sanction is financial, not doctrinal. She withdrew the moment she saw contamination. That is consistent with her nature. He leaned back, fingertips pressing together. No, the source lies closer to Kitchens. Bell, perhaps, or Vesselt. We must be certain I was still thinking about Tuck's performance. He went down too easy, if you ask me. Like a man relieved to confess, precisely, Wolfe murmured. Which means he is not finished. He will attempt justification. He may even attempt escape. The police will delay, therefore we must act tonight. That was Wolfe being decisive, and I knew better than to argue. He rang for Fritz, who arrived silently. Fritz, Wolfe said, bring me the saucer. And a decanter of vinegar. Archie, open the safe. I retrieved the knife, still wrapped, and set it on the desk. Wolfe unwrapped it slowly, as though unmasking an impostor. He tilted the blade again, coaxing another bead of oil. This time, instead of letting it fall alone, he poured a thin stream of vinegar beside it. The two liquids met, swirled, and separated. Wolfe watched intently. There, he said. The oil resists. It clings, defiant. A true kitchen oil would yield. This is synthetic, Archie. Not food. Not honest, which means Mr. Tuck lied when he claimed to slice fennel. He was never careless. His cut was ritual. The oil is laboratory, not larder. He has an accomplice with means, and I intend to identify him before dawn. The phone rang before I could reply. I picked it up. Saul's voice came across, dry as dust. Archie, you'll want to know. Tuck just left his apartment. He's not heading home. He's meeting someone at Vesselt's. After hours. I covered the mouthpiece. Wolfe had his eyes closed, but he nodded once, already expecting it. "Follow," Wolfe said. I relayed it. Saul grunted. "Already am." "Keep Wolfe warm. I'll call back when I see who joins him." When I hung up, Wolfe had leaned back into his chair, eyes still shut, but his voice was alive. "It will be Vesselt." His pride is vulnerable. A man who mistrusts sous chefs will be susceptible to a doctrine of knives, or bell. Resentment breeds fanaticism. We shall know shortly. I poured myself another drink, this one stiffer. The brownstone was quiet except for the faint clink of Fritz cleaning in the kitchen. Outside, the city muttered through its tires. Wolfe sat like a mountain, immovable. Then the phone rang again. This time Saul's voice was sharper. "Vesselt." He just unlocked the back door. Tuck's inside with him. They're arguing. I can't hear words, but the heat's up. "Stay," Wolfe commanded when I relayed it. "Listen, watch, but do not intervene until one strikes." I repeated it. Saul muttered something not fit for print, but agreed. We waited. The minutes crawled. Wolfe didn't move, but I could see his lips pressed tighter, the only sign he was wound. At last, the phone rang again. "They're out in the alley," Saul reported. "Veselt's shouting about betrayal. He's waving something, looks like another knife. Tuck's trying to calm him down." "Hold on," the line crackled. "No, wait, there." The sound broke, then came back ragged. "Veselt just threw the knife in the trash. Tuck looks wrecked. They're going back inside. I'll tail when they leave." I repeated it, and Wolfe's eyes opened at last, glinting. There. Confirmation. Veselt was supplier, his pride, his secrecy. He wished to play philosopher in his kitchen, and Tuck became his voice. Together they devised this idiocy. "So tomorrow we tell the police?" I asked. "Tomorrow," Wolfe said. "But first, Archie, telephone Miss Vane. Tell her she is absolved. She was merely courier, nothing more. Then call Inspector Kramer. He will resist as he always does, but by morning he shall have 2 men in custody." I did as ordered, though Miss Vane's voice cracked with relief, and Kramer's exploded with suspicion. Wolfe took neither call himself. He simply leaned back, eyes shut, lips moving slightly as though tasting a bitter herb. When I hung up, he opened his eyes. "It is finished," he said, "not by violence, but by exposure." The knives were never weapons, Archie. They were mirrors. One dripped without cutting, one cut without dripping. Together they revealed their makers, men who feared stain more than guilt, and that fear has undone them. I nodded, though I was still thinking about Saul in the alley, watching 2 men betray each other in the dark. Wolfe reached for his beer. Fritz arrived with dinner, and the brownstone sighed back into order. But I couldn't shake the image of Tuck's eyes when he spoke of purity. I knew we'd see it again, in some courtroom or headline, before the city forgot. And I knew Wolfe was right. Stains don't vanish, no matter how clean the blade. Kramer arrived before noon the next day, which meant he had spent the night turning over what I'd told him on the phone. He came in carrying suspicion like a cigar he'd already bitten too hard. Fritz admitted him with the minimum of warmth, and I ushered him into the office where Wolfe sat as immovable as ever, a bottle of beer within reach. "All right, Wolfe," Kramer barked. "I'm here. But if this is another one of your parlor tricks, I swear—" "Phooey," Wolfe said mildly. "You swear too often, Inspector." "Sit." "Archie, the notes I handed Kramer, the typed sheets Wolfe had dictated to me that morning, outlining the progression from parcel to philosophy. He skimmed them, muttering, until his eyes stopped at the names. "You're telling me Julian Tuck and Ilko Vesselt cooked up some kind of doctrine with knives. That's your story." "Not a story," Wolfe said. "A fact. Tuck supplied the doctrine, Vesselt supplied the tools. Rook financed, Pirro observed. Prentice indulged. Miss Vane attempted to resist. Mr. Villar was wounded, silenced by pride. You now have the whole Kramer slapped the paper against his knee. You expect me to walk into headquarters with this? A creed about clean knives. I expect you to walk in with 2 men already identified by your witness in the alley, Wolfe said. Saul Panzer observed Wesselt discard a knife, shouting of betrayal. That is corroboration. Add to it Tuck's confession in this room, heard by 7 people. You have more than philosophy. You have conspiracy and assault. Kramer's scowl deepened, but he didn't argue. He knew Wolfe too well. All right, he growled. I'll pull them in. But if this unravels? It will not, Wolfe said firmly. They are already undone. Kramer stood, stuffed the notes into his coat and stalked out, leaving the air heavier than when he came. I shut the door behind him and looked back at Wolfe. Think he'll play it straight? He will bluster, but he will act, Wolfe said. The evidence is sufficient. Tuck's words, Wesselt's knife, Pirot's surveillance. Rook will wriggle, Prentice will retreat, but the structure is collapsed. The sanctity of this house is restored. That was Wolfe's way of saying we'd won, though he never used the word. He poured himself another beer and let silence claim the room. By evening, the city had begun to murmur the news. Fritz carried in the Gazette with supper, laying it on the stand beside Wolfe. The headline was modest. Chef, sommelier, held in knife probe. But the story beneath carried all the weight. Tuck had been arrested at his apartment, Wesselt at the restaurant. Rook's name was mentioned, though not charged, described as a financier whose business interests are under review. Prentice had issued a statement denying knowledge. Pirot had vanished, though Kramer promised he would surface soon enough. I read it aloud while Wolfe ate, though I could tell he already knew the shape of it. When I finished, I said, "Not bad for 2 knives and a little perfume." "Pfui," Wolfe said, dabbing at his lips. It was never about knives. It was about men. Knives merely gave them license to reveal themselves. That should have been the end, but I wasn't satisfied. "What about Amelia Vane?" I asked. "She's the one who carried it here." She's still looking over her shoulder. Wolfe sighed, the sound of a man forced into charity. She is absolved. Her role was reluctant, her intention protective. She may return to her work, though she will not find the dining room unchanged. Rook's shadow lingers, but she will endure. Some do. He leaned back, folding his hands. "Archie, we are finished. File the case. When Kramer next calls, I shall not answer." That was Wolfe's dismissal, but I lingered, thinking about Tuck and Wesselt in their cells, about Rook in his penthouse, about Pirot on some street corner waiting for orders that would never come. I thought about Jaime Villar, lying in his hospital bed, insisting he slipped, and I thought about Amelia, walking back into Wesselt's with her head high and her nerves raw. Wolfe closed his eyes and let the world recede. Dinner was served. The orchids waited upstairs. Outside, the city went on cutting and dripping, forgetting and remembering. I went to the window, watching the traffic lights change, and said to myself what Wolfe would never say aloud. The knife had won nothing. It had been just steel, just oil, just a stage for men who wanted to believe their stains could be erased. But stains don't listen to doctrine. They linger, visible or not. Behind me, Wolfe cleared his throat as if he'd caught the shape of my thought without hearing it. "Archie," he said, "the lesson is simple. There is no knife that drips without cutting. The cut is always there, whether you see it or not." I turned, nodded, and let him have the last word. Because in this house, he always does. The brownstone was quiet again, the kind of quiet that Wolfe insists upon as both privilege and right. The knife was no longer in the safe. It had gone off in Kramer's custody, wrapped, tagged, and docketed. but the impression of it remained on the officer like a stain you can't quite scrub. Wolfe sat with a glass of beer, his bulk sunk into the chair that had carried the weight of his deductions. Fritz was in the kitchen preparing trout, and the scent of tarragon floated through faintly. I was at my desk with the typewriter, finishing the notes Wolfe had ordered me to file, when the bell rang. I went, half expecting Kramer's cigar to precede him. Instead, it was Amelia Vane, her composure reassembled, her eyes clearer than before. She stepped inside like someone testing whether the ground would hold. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "I came to thank Mr. Wolfe." "And you," I ushered her into the office. Wolfe inclined his head without rising. "Miss Vane, you are absolved. Your burden was never yours to carry." She looked at him steadily. It didn't feel that way. Carrying it, seeing that knife in my kitchen, I thought I'd never shake it. "You will," Wolfe said. "The mind relinquishes what it cannot use." "You acted with prudence. That is enough." She nodded, then turned to me. "And Mr. Villar?" "Alive," I told her. "Still stubborn, but alive. Kramer will see to his testimony." Relief flickered across her face. She straightened her shoulders. "Then I'll go back. Vesselts will suffer, but the dining room belongs to more than one man. We'll endure." Wolfe closed his eyes. "Endurance is a greater virtue than purity, Miss Vane." Remember that she left quietly, her presence fading into the city beyond the door. When the latch clicked shut, Wolfe reached for his beer again, satisfied in his fashion. "That's it?" I asked him. "Case closed, conscience clear, dinner waiting." "Precisely," he said. "The knives are in custody, the culprits exposed. The brownstone resumes its order." He lifted the glass and sipped. "Archie, the world is full of men who believe that by scrubbing away stains they erase consequence. They are wrong. The stain persists, if not on steel, then in memory. Civilization depends on remembering what was done, not pretending it never happened." I leaned back, watching him in his element, the philosopher-judge disguised as a man too heavy to move. "So what do I file this under? The case of the knife that dripped without cutting?" "If you must," he said dryly. "But file it." He shut his eyes, which was permission and dismissal rolled into one. Dinner came, trout with tarragon, and the brownstone glowed with its usual sanctity. Outside, the city would go on, pretending it could stay clean. Inside, Wolfe had rendered his judgment, and that was enough. I typed the last line of my notes, shut the machine, and looked at him across the room. He was already lost in the silence he guarded so fiercely. I smiled to myself because I knew how this story would end. It always does. With Nero Wolfe in his chair, full of beer and certainty, and me closing the case.